I panicked. My father-in-law came in again with ropes. I tried to fight him, but he was too strong. He tied me and my son together.
You're going to burn to death and get out of my son's life. You and this bastard, die!
No, don't do this to me, sir. I beg of you. Please, please. He ignored me and went out, leaving the door open. The smoke had doubled now, and I could barely see anything. I was in tears. My father-in-law had left the house. I could see the fire already coming up the stairs. I screamed and cried for help, hoping someone heard me. But no help came. Hi, my name is Grace. I'd met Collins about a year and a few months ago, and we'd been dating for a year. He proposed marriage to me 2 weeks back, and I happily agreed. We were both in love with each other and were sure about what we wanted. He'd taken me to see his parents, and we were sitting together in their living room, the couple sitting opposite us.
Mom, Dad, this is Gracie. I found love in her, and I want to marry her. I proposed to her already, and she agreed.
His mother was more friendly. She smiled at me and welcomed me. However, for his father, it was different. He had an unreadable expression on his face.
Marriage with her? What happened to Stacy? Weren't you both in a relationship?
Collins had told me about her. They'd truly dated after being best friends for a very long time. But they broke up barely a month later after realizing they didn't match as relation partners. Collins told his dad that nothing was between them, and the man went quiet. Until I left, he kept throwing cold glances at me and refused to contribute to the wedding plan conversation. After we left, Collins apologized. I didn't hold any grudges, though. Our wedding finally happened, and my father-in-law was absent. His excuse? Well, his friends wanted to have a drink with him because they hadn't had one in a while. And my father-in-law decided to drink with them on my wedding day. Collins had been so pissed, but I calmed him. I didn't want him being angry on our big day. He felt so bad about his dad's actions, but we got to enjoy the wedding without him. We'd both been granted a week holiday for our honeymoon. Instead of going somewhere else, I'd told Collins it would be better to have it at home. We were building a family house, so we put the money for traveling and others into it. On the second day of our honeymoon, my father-in-law suddenly showed up. I was more than shocked to see him. I looked down and saw that he was with a bag. He brushed us off and walked into the house.
It's our honeymoon, Dad. What the hell are you doing here?
The man didn't respond. Quietly, he showed himself in and went into our guest room. Throughout the week, he didn't give us any time to be alone. He was always taking Collins away or playing loud songs to disturb us. The week didn't go well. My father-in-law will boss me around and complain about all the food I cooked, comparing me to Stacy.
I wish my son had married Stacy. Instead, she's more pretty, educated, and cooks better.
I felt bad. Collins, on the other hand, nearly lost his cool and wanted to kick him out, but I stopped him. It's fine, baby. We can have our honeymoon every day. Don't disrespect your father over this. He did listen to me. After a week, my father-in-law packed his bags and left as quietly as he came. We had to resume working, but we never failed to create time for ourselves. A year later, I got pregnant with our first child. Collins and my mother-in-law were overwhelmed with happiness. But my father-in-law was different.
How are we even sure the pregnancy belongs to my son? For all we know, you could just be trying to pin someone else's child on him. Excuse us. What is that supposed to mean, Dad? Am I wrong? She has the appearance of a prostitute. Stacy was never like this. Well, Stacy is out of my life. Understand that, okay?
I was offended by his words, but my mother-in-law whispered an apology to me. My father-in-law stormed out of the house. We left about an hour later. Collins apologized, but I told him I didn't take any offense. During my 4th month, Collins was transferred to a different branch, where he worked as the overseas ambassador of the company, meaning he would have to go on trips. I knew I'd miss him, but it was all for our future. I had to be strong. I'd already stopped going to the office after reaching my 3rd month. The company had accepted my request to work from home. Since Collins traveled a lot, I was always home. My mother-in-law was a part-time teacher. Whenever she was returning home, she usually stopped by to help me with things. That made everything easy for me. One day, my father-in-law suddenly visited me. I was surprised to see him, as he hadn't shown any form of care since I got pregnant.
Are you going to leave me standing here, you mannerless girl?
I quickly ushered him in. He walked to the living room and sat on the couch. I grabbed my laptop from the dining table and followed him.
Stop standing there like a fool and get me a beer.
Luckily, we still had beer in the house. I dropped my laptop on the table in front of him and rushed to the kitchen. I fetched a can of beer and brought it to him. It was so swift. As he opened it, I can't tell how it happened, but I saw my laptop immediately go blank as he spilled the beer on it. He poured the remaining on the floor before standing up. I was horrified.
I heard you're still working. Well, with your laptop gone, I don't think you can continue. Clean up the floor. It's what you're meant to be doing. Cooking and cleaning.
I watched as he walked away. I immediately called Collins and told him about it. He was livid. He wanted to pause his trip and returned home to confront his father, but I begged him not to. I'll just get a new laptop. It's just so unfair that he hates me this way. Collins apologized to me and promised a new laptop the next day. Luckily, I was able to retrieve important things from the old one, and my job didn't stop. The next time he suddenly visited, he broke glass cups everywhere in the house and asked me to pack them all like a true housewife. I tried to, but I couldn't pack it all. I even sustained injuries in both my feet and hands. My mother-in-law came around while I was at it and screamed as she saw me. I told her about what her husband did, but also begged her not to confront him. She agreed and immediately took me to a hospital. While I was getting treated, she contacted a professional cleaning agency, and they helped with the cleaning. Collins got to know about it through his mom, and he called his dad and warned him never to visit me again or he would call the cops on him. Luckily, the threat worked, and he didn't visit again. Even at the hospital after I put to birth, he didn't show up, nor did he call to congratulate me. I didn't mind. Collins was able to stay home with me and our child for a month, but afterward, he had to go back to work. My mother-in-law came to stay with me. She promised to be with me and her grandkid for 6 months. One day, 2 months later, my mother-in-law left me to do some grocery shopping. I knew she'd take a long time because the shop was quite far. I decided to pass the time with movies. However, 10 minutes after she left, I suddenly heard the doorbell. I went to open it and was shocked to see my father-in-law. He looked like he was high or drunk. He pushed me outside and walked into the house. "Why are you here? Collins asked you not to visit me." He slapped me, the force pushing me to the floor.
I'm going to kill you and that bastard child of yours. You're undeserving of my son, you ugly thing. I hate your every existence.
What did I ever do to you?
You managed to turn my son against me. I simply hate you. Now come here.
He pulled me up by my hair and dragged me up to my room, ignoring my cries and pleading for him to stop. He locked me in my room and went downstairs. The next time he opened the door, he roughly threw my son at me. Luckily, I caught him. I cried and begged my father-in-law to not do anything stupid, but it all fell on deaf ears. I wanted to call someone, but I wasn't with my phone. I didn't hear anything, so I didn't know what he was up to. However, about 5 minutes later, smoke was getting into my room from beneath the door. I panicked. My father-in-law came in again with ropes. I tried to fight him, but he was too strong. He tied me and my son together.
You're going to burn to death and get out of my son's life. You and this bastard, die.
No, don't do this to me, sir. I beg of you. Please, please. He ignored me and went out, leaving the door open. The smoke had doubled now, and I could barely see anything. I was in tears. My father-in-law had left the house. I could see the fire already coming up the stairs. I screamed and cried for help, hoping someone heard me. But no help came. I looked at my child, and he didn't seem like he was breathing. I panicked even more. I was starting to lose my breath, but I didn't care. All I worried about was my child. Finally, before passing out, I saw some uniformed men hurrying in. Please, save my child. Please. Luckily, we were rescued. Apparently, my mother-in-law had forgotten her card at home. She'd come back to take it, but met the house on fire. She immediately contacted the firemen, and that was how I got saved. I didn't get burns, but I inhaled a lot of smoke alongside my son. Collins immediately returned home after my mother-in-law informed him. My father-in-law was nowhere to be found, but they didn't worry. That didn't last long, though. The cops immediately swung into action when I told them my father-in-law was the one behind the fire. Collins also went in search of him. According to what I heard a day later, my father-in-law had been found with a broken rib, jaw, nose, and ankle. Collins had found him first and beat him up that badly before contacting the police. He was taken to court. With my testimony and the CCTV footage, he was found guilty. My mother-in-law also sued him for domestic violence. He'd been abusing her for years, and the fire incident made her finally report him. He was guilty of arson, attempted murder, and domestic violence. He went to jail to serve his 40 years term with a permanently damaged ankle, broken rib that made him unable to stand straight, and jawbone issues. My mother-in-law also got a divorce from him, and both she and her son cut all ties with him. We moved into our new house, which Collins had completed and planned to show to me on my birthday. Well, my father-in-law didn't make that possible. Anyway, I was fine. And so was my child. My mother-in-law said she was happier without him. She loved and took care of me even more, and Collins was able to get the company to give him more free time so he could spend more time with me and our son. 5 years later, I visited my father-in-law with my son, and I could see the deep regret on his face when he saw how grown the boy he'd tried to kill had become. This is the last time you'll be seeing him. I'm happy you won't get to be a part of his life. I hope you rot in here for hating and hurting me for no reason. Goodbye. He was crying and begging for my forgiveness. But just as he did on the day he set the house on fire while I was tied up in the room, I ignored him and walked away with my son. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment. I had only been at the hospital for less than 12 hours, and since the birth was complicated, I had to undergo an operation, and the doctors wanted to keep me hospitalized for at least a week.
What the hell are you still doing here? You were supposed to start your shift at 9 o'clock. This is not how you're going to progress in this company.
What are you doing here? I quit, in case you didn't notice.
There's no such thing as quitting. I've told you all 1,000 times. So get up from that bed and come with me. We have projects to finish in the office.
I'm not going anywhere. In case you haven't noticed, I'm not in a condition to do so. And if you want to fire me for it, go ahead. I quit anyway. The doctors asked my boss to leave, but it was obvious he wanted to have the last word and wouldn't easily accept that I had told him to go. As he saw it, he was doing me a favor by letting me be in the hospital at that moment. Hello, my name is Karen, and for the past few months I've been working at an interior design company. The job is what I've always dreamed of doing, and my colleagues are fantastic as well. If I had to complain about something, it would probably be the boss. He turned out to be quite a character, in the worst sense of the word. When people worked the required hours, even putting in some extra time for the benefit of the business, my boss was all smiles and compliments, pointing out that each of us was crucial for the company to keep running, and he was very happy to have us under his command. Now, if anyone made the slightest mistake, like printing a document double-sided instead of single-sided, his merciless fury was unleashed. All those compliments he once gave seemed like they never existed. When he got angry, he tended to yell, throw objects that got in his way, and call us everything from ungrateful to useless, making it very clear that if the company was still standing, it was because he was at the helm.
One of these days, the boss is going to get us in trouble.
I heard about Mark. Is he okay? I heard the last vase. The boss smashed, almost hit his head.
Oh yes, he's fine. Luckily, the vase only grazed him. I said that because there's going to be a labor inspection next week, and considering how the boss is, it wouldn't surprise me if it ended up in an interrogation.
As much as I'd like to see him have a hard time, I don't think that will happen. The boss is very good at keeping up appearances. And I was right because I had noticed that the boss did the same when clients came to the building, and he had to be at the forefront to attend to them. He made sure to be punctual where he was supposed to be, always greeting visitors with a smile and a kind remark. The compliments towards his employees would return, and if any employee made a mistake during that time, he would downplay it, assuring them that anyone could make a mistake and that it wasn't necessary to worry. It seemed like the boss had two opposite personalities. When the clients, or the inspection in this case, left, he would go back to being the same demon as always, and his kind phase, on those days when he was in a good enough mood to appreciate others' efforts, was something very sporadic. It might happen once every 3 weeks. Remembering his employees' past mistakes, he wouldn't hesitate to punish them harshly, as if instead of misplacing a report, they had deliberately set fire to his office.
And remember, in this company, taking time off for nonsense is not allowed. You have a few vacation days per year, as the law dictates. If you want to go fool around outside of those dates, don't bother coming back. And what if we're sick, or have to be absent due to an emergency? We can't plan illnesses. In that case, make sure you're on the brink of death, because I'm not going to grant you the courtesy of paid leave for just a cold.
Well, if we're going to die, we won't need that money anyway, but it would be nice to be able to take leave, even unpaid, in case of an emergency.
I said no emergencies. The day you signed the contract, you assured that you would live for and dedicate yourself to the company, making the necessary sacrifices. So no backing out, or I'll make sure you don't get hired anywhere else.
My boss was serious when he said he wouldn't accept the slightest lack of discipline when it came to showing up for work. And the other employees noticed it too. Every time someone needed to take days off for illness or to attend to a seriously ill family member, that person never returned to the office again. They were fired without further ado, as if it were normal not to accept that a worker might need more days off than those agreed upon in a contract. Injustices were commonplace, and it seemed my boss lacked the empathy needed to understand that people didn't take time off from their jobs for fun.
If they want to take leave for stress, they shouldn't come back. What's the point of being employed here in the first place if they can't handle anything? It's not just stress, it's also depression. It's necessary to take care of mental health. And how is that my problem? If they're sad, they should be sad at home and stop crying in my office. I'll prepare their severance package, and they'll be done with a job they'll never get back.
I had been thinking about quitting for a while, and when I got pregnant, I thought that when I took maternity leave, it would be the perfect time to announce my resignation. Like many other colleagues who had gone through a similar situation or had seen my boss's ways when someone did something he simply didn't approve of, I didn't want to spend any more time in that company. I was just going to stick around long enough to earn some extra money until my baby was born. Right before the baby was born, when the appointed date to go to the hospital came, I would leave without looking back. I had even talked to human resources to let them know in advance that instead of taking leave, I would just quit then. Of course, I didn't mention any of this to my boss. I knew that if I even hinted that I was thinking of quitting, he would go ballistic and probably end up firing me on the spot. So the only thing he knew, up to the very end, when I had to take my leave to the hospital, was that I might have to take at least one day on leave. And of course, that was a lie. The truth was, I resigned before I gave birth. As usual, my clueless boss kept arguing until the end.
Don't even think that just because you're having a baby, you'll be able to take leave. We don't do things that way in my company.
But by law, I'm entitled to it.
I know what the law says, thank you very much, but I don't care. You have a commitment to the company, and it's enough that I let you go to the hospital the day the baby is born.
And no, I should thank you for allowing me to give birth in a more comfortable place than the office, with appropriate medical care. That comment made him furious once again. He didn't seem to realize that he could be reported if the authorities found out how he belittled his workers' problems and didn't grant them the necessary pay or vacations depending on the situation. For my part, I thought that when the time came for me to go to the hospital, there wouldn't be a problem. Because yes, my boss had threatened to fire me, but I was going to leave anyway. And it wasn't like he could show up at the hospital where I was giving birth to demand that I return to the office, right? Not only would that be terribly inappropriate, but it would make no sense. Besides, I had given sufficient notice for them to find a replacement. My conscience was clear. By the time I got to the hospital, my boss should have already taken notice of my resignation, since I left instructions for him to be informed by then. Therefore, I didn't think that just a few hours after giving birth, my boss would actually show up at my hospital to do exactly what I could only have imagined in my nightmares. I had only been at the hospital for less than 12 hours, and since the birth was complicated, I had to undergo an operation, and the doctors wanted to keep me hospitalized for at least a week.
What the hell are you still doing here? You were supposed to start your shift at 9 o'clock. This is not how you're going to progress in this company.
What are you doing here? I quit, in case you didn't notice.
There's no such thing as quitting. I've told you all 1,000 times. So get up from that bed and come with me. We have projects to finish in the office.
I'm not going anywhere. In case you haven't noticed, I'm not in a condition to do so. And if you want to fire me for it, go ahead. I quit anyway. The doctors asked my boss to leave, but it was obvious he wanted to have the last word and wouldn't easily accept that I had told him to go. As he saw it, he was doing me a favor by letting me be in the hospital at that moment. Therefore, the medical care I could receive also had to end precisely when he decided. My husband and baby didn't matter to him, and he let me know by yelling at me so that half the health center could hear the disturbances that were about to occur in that room. Maybe I could be fired, but my boss wouldn't tolerate the humiliation of being sent out by a mere employee. It didn't matter. I didn't work for him anymore. He still saw me that way. So he made himself heard in a very inappropriate way. So much so that several nurses had to come to throw him out. My boss started a physical fight with them during visiting hours, creating chaos. And while someone was busy calling the police, a team of doctors from a mental institution across the street had to come to the rescue, as they seemed to have detected erratic and violent behavior in my boss that deserved to be studied in some psychiatric ward. When the authorities arrived, they were undecided about what would be more appropriate, to put my boss in jail or in a psychiatric institution. In the end, as it couldn't be otherwise, my boss ended up in preventive detention. A few days later, a coworker called me.
Karen, we need your help.
If it's for work, I'm not coming back. I've already decided.
Oh no, it's not for work. Or it is, but we're not asking you to come back. You see, we've heard what the boss did, and several coworkers have decided to file a collective complaint, so he pays for all the injustices he made us suffer. I was calling to see if you'd like to join and testify against him.
Of course, I wasn't going to say no to that. With the complaint filed and backed by more than 24 people, both current and former employees of the company, what could have been a fine and several months of community service for my boss ended up being a sentence of more than 10 years in prison for labor abuse and not granting his employees the rights they were legally entitled to. While in prison, my boss still didn't change. Unfortunately for him, he started bossing one of the inmates around, not knowing that the inmate was part of a dangerous gang. One day, the inmate had enough and my boss was beaten severely, resulting in one of his fingers being broken. The gang member sentence was extended because of that act. My ex-boss, Case, made the news, and my ex-boss's reputation was so tarnished that no one would want to hire him ever again, even when he will be out of jail. Even if he had done some good for the company, people only remembered the bad. And even those things that previously didn't seem so important or could have been seen as slip-ups now took on a more bitter tone. While my ex-boss served his well-deserved sentence and went viral on social media as one of the worst employers imaginable, I was finally able to live peacefully with my family, happy that justice had been served and also having received a good compensation that the court ordered my boss to pay all the victims of his outbursts. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.